I have covered a ton on programming on this channel over the last few years, and it's one of those topics that you guys just respond the best to. We've gotten into everything from how elite competitive lifters peak their strength to how the most successful and popular ebook training templates operate. And we've tried to pick them apart to see what they have in common, see how and why they're different, and when it might be appropriate for you to take one path over the other. But the one thing I haven't talked about, which probably applies to more of you than it doesn't, is when it is appropriate to ditch the program and how to go about that. Now, I know that I had years early on when I started training, I was 13, 14, 15, where the only thing I knew was to go into the gym, do a bunch of work, and exhaust myself. And the thing is, it worked really well. Now, part of that is because I was newer, and when you're new, you respond to absolutely everything. But there's a reason that a lot of successful bodybuilders and physique athletes, or even field athletes who need to get stronger in the gym, but exactly how they get stronger or exactly how they optimize their strength isn't quite as important. There's a lot more play in the joints with those types of training, which means you can get away with a lot more variety, a lot less structure, as long as a few basic rules are met. So I'm going to cover today when it's appropriate to ditch the program and exactly how you're going to go about putting that together to make sure that you keep growing and you're not just wasting hours in the gym. So the three reasons, the big three that I can think of with regards to ditching the programming and following an instinctive training template is if you're working around an injury where you have to kind of play it by ear, you can't predictably push it on the same exercise. Maybe you're dealing with overuse issues, maybe benching too many days in a row causes problems. Maybe you have to be really careful with when you can squat depending on how you're feeling that day. So anything where you have to kind of play it by ear, you're going to want a structure that's really adaptable and flexible. Burnout is another big one. Many of you guys know, especially you powerlifting nerds, you know how absolutely monotonous it is to just go through the same work week after week. It gets very boring. It's a problem I have with my clients. It's a problem I've experienced when I was focused on my static lifts. So it's important to know that the most productive workout, the most optimal training template is the one that you are going to do and take seriously. That can't be understated. Life circumstances, that's the other one. If you find yourself away from home or if you're limited on the equipment you have, there's plenty of circumstances where your life becomes chaos and you have to be able to make do with what you have. And if you are so locked into your training template, you become one of these lifting divas that you can't work out without your training equipment. So if you lose your gym bag on a flight, you're not going to work out on vacation because I can't lift without my belt, my shoes, my wraps. Or if you don't have the right piece of equipment or if the right bar isn't available, everything falls apart. You want to learn how to be adaptable in the gym because sometimes life just comes in and slaps you upside the head. So the parameters of instinctive training, this is specifically what we're talking about. We're talking about a type of program that's not going to have a preset progression. So we're not having percentages written out. We're not having a specific rate of progression where you know you're going to do the same exercise week in, week out, stacking on top to make those workouts more difficult. And there's not going to be fixed exercises. This is where a lot of the variability has to come from. Again, working around injury and life circumstances, you might not always have the same equipment or be able to handle the same movements the same way. And then burnout. The easiest way to get around monotony is to allow yourself a bit of variety. So no fixed exercises, no set progression. We want to be able to go into the gym and kind of piece together our workouts depending on what our goals are and how we feel that day. So there's a method of auto-regulation there. This works absolutely best for hypertrophy because there's just more bleed over from different modes of training and different exercises. As long as some things are controlled for, like the amount of work and the effort, you can jump around to a lot of different exercises. I mean, your biceps, your back, your pecs, they're going to respond very well as long as you are pushing that over time. Strength tends to end up being a little more specific to the movement that you're training. That's the main way that we drive strength is we focus on individual movements. We get really good at them. By the time you've gotten good at them, your strength is increased. And that's a cycle that we try to exploit in strength programs. Now, the thing is, for you guys that are really worried about your strength not being optimal at all times, strength still goes up on hypertrophy plans. Strength is still a logical byproduct of any program where you have engaged in progressive overload and you've added muscle. So don't worry about it, your strength will go up. But I recommend this in off-season phases. I recommend this for people that just need a break from the strength work, or again, if any one of these circumstances apply to you. I got a favor to ask you guys. If you found any of this helpful, insightful, entertaining, please consider hitting the subscribe button. I'm making a push to 100,000 followers, which is insane. I never thought I'd be remotely close to that number, but I do have a challenge lined up. When I do hit 100K, I'm doing a 100 rep max squat. So help me check that 100 repper off the bucket list. Thanks so much for your support. It is immensely appreciated. So there's two rules we have to abide by if we want to make this work. If we don't want to rely on the same exercises week in, week out, and if we don't want to engage in a rigid progression week in, week out, then that means the amount of work you do in the workout drives progress. Now, this might be how a lot of you trained when you started. This might be how a lot of you bodybuilders and physique guys already train. You go in and it's the exhaustion, the fatigue, the hard work that you do that is going to drive progress. And because that's such a hugely beneficial stimulus, it allows you to grow without worrying about these little details on the side. You don't have to keep track of every set and every rep that you do. You know that you're getting a certain amount of work in and you're pushing the envelope, and that's always the theme that's present. The other thing is that progressive overload has to be automatic, it has to be intuitive, it has to be organic. We're not scheduling the progressive overload, and that's how most programs work. They put you on a deadline where you are hitting these calculated increases in stress. Usually it's more weight, but it can be more volume, more density, or more specificity, whatever it might be. For us, progressive overload has to come as a natural byproduct of the strength and conditioning that we gain by going through these hard workouts day in, day out. So by having intensity and effort always very, very high, as we get stronger, we're going to naturally overload progressively, because as we get stronger, we'll use more weight. The more weight will be a new stimulus, should get us stronger. It should be a positive feedback loop that causes a lot of substantial growth, regardless of what your exact exercise selection is for that week or exactly what sets and rep scheme you committed to. So we need some rules to make this tenable. There still has to be boundaries. Now, what I recommend is that you commit to this list of rules right here. This will give you kind of the broad outline to work around. So as you're driving to the gym, you can think, okay, how do I feel? How are my elbows? How are my shoulders? What do I think I can get away with today? Okay, I know I need to do this many exercises because we're training this body part, and I know that these are the amount of sets that I want to do, and this is the basic rep range that I'm going to be working in. And that's going to give you an outline that makes it easy to make those selections and guarantees that your workouts are actually going to carry over into each other. And you're not just going to be bouncing all over the place doing random stuff. So for a split, a body part split is going to be the easiest. Now, if you are focused more on doing this to augment your main lifts, it's super easy to run a body part split that still emphasizes compound movements. So you could loosely have like a bench day, and that can really be like a chest and tricep day. And it gives you a ton of leeway to do things that are productive for benching, but you're not specifically confined to having to bench press, especially at a given percentage or amount of volume. You want to keep the number of exercises and sets the same week to week, so you know no matter what you do, 3 to 5 sets, pretty good range. If you're going less than that, you're in high intensity training, which is perfectly fine. I don't believe high intensity training is ineffective. I just think its effects are largely overblown. And you can go much higher volume. You can do more than 5 sets, but at that point, the amount of weight you can use, the amount of effort you can put out is going to suffer a little bit. So 3 to 5 sets on one exercise tends to be good enough for most people. And as long as you got your money's worth, you can move on to the next one. Rep ranges. For instinctive training, I strongly recommend that you just by default include a lot of different rep ranges. Instinctive training kind of fits pretty well with like a conjugate or concurrent style of training. The idea is that you're training everything at once. So by having those things present, that's thought of as like non-periodization. So you don't have to plan week to week because you're not moving through these different ranges from 12s to 8s to 5s. You're doing them all at once, and it takes a guesswork out. It makes it so that you don't have to keep track of these different ranges as you move through time. So I think that's smart if you're going to train that way, and I think it's a really easy way to maintain strength and to get the benefit of all of these different training thresholds without having to overthink it. So generally, you're going to start out with the heavier weight on your compound sets earlier on in the workout. Then eventually, as you get into the isolation and accessory, you're going to push fatigue more. You're going to have the reps higher. That's a very broad general outline. Now, of course, there's exceptions. I do like things like pre-fatigue. I do like things like putting some of the compound movements later in the workout when you're a little gassed. And I do like things like pyramids, where you're starting out with high reps before you get to the heavy weight, so you're a little fatigued. So rep ranges, I do recommend a spread. Don't shy away from hitting a top set of 3 or 5 on a compound movement, and certainly don't shy away from moving into 8s, 10s, 12s, because those are very productive for a wide variety of exercises. And then effort just has to be high. As long as you're coming in, you're hitting the gas. I wouldn't count anything under an RPE 8 as a working set. 2 reps from failure. If you're more than that, count it as a warm-up. If you're there, then that's part of your 3 to 5 working sets, but aim to get at least one of those sets actually to failure. I don't think, if you're hypertrophy driven, again, we're not on a strength template. If you're not on a strength template where you have to be able to predict your levels of fatigue from workout to workout, there isn't really a good reason to avoid failure. Now, these are some of the tactics I like to use when I am training instinctively that take a lot of the guesswork out and make it real easy to do something different and productive, get a good workout without having to micromanage everything. Pyramids go really well with an instinctive approach, with a non-programming approach, because pyramids have a lot of moving pieces. Not only are you changing the percentage, the weight set to set, but you're changing the number of reps. So it gets a little complex when you're trying to progress a pyramid scheme in sequence over many weeks. So this is a good way to guarantee you're going to get a good amount of fatigue, a good amount of volume, but you're also going to cover a variety of training thresholds. So you're going to get your heavy touch for the day. You're going to get a little bit of neurological activation, a little bit of strength-specific activation. So pyramids, anything that varies the load, I think is hugely beneficial. I like to pyramid up when I'm focused more on hypertrophy. There might be a phase where you're like, you know what, I'm going to take 3 months and I'm just going to do some broad strength work where I'm not really tethered to a program. Reverse pyramids work extremely well. Warm up, get up to like a top 3 to 5 reps, drop some weight, 8 to 10, drop some weight, 12 to 15. That way you're more fresh for your heaviest set, so it's more strength specific, and you get the benefit of post-activation potentiation. Big fan of those. Pre-fatigue, this is another one. I talked about this in one of my last videos about winning warm-ups, and said in that video what I thought about that, and I'll let you go find that out for yourselves. But basic idea is that it's been around for a long time. The idea that you would do some type of isolation work or some type of smaller work to fatigue a muscle group or body part or movement pattern before doing your heavy work. If done well, it can be very productive. Now, the trick here is to not absolutely gas yourself out. So you don't want to completely blow out, say, your pecs before you go and do a bunch of bench pressing. But if you do dose just a bit, enough to get you a little bit pumped, enough to get you a little bit fatigued, what you'll find is that there's an extra element of challenge to your compound work. It's still productive for hypertrophy, and it allows you to get away with a hard stimulus while using less weight. So the fact of being able to get away with less weight on some of these compound movements, again, if you have overuse issues or you're burnt out, that can help with that immensely. You'll be amazed at how fast you adapt to pre-fatigue work. You'll be amazed at how fast you adapt. I started doing chest flies because my chest is kind of underdeveloped, so I would do it first in my workout. And I also did it because it would help my shoulders get warm, because too much benching really starts to eat away at my shoulders. And I found that my benching went way better when I had a little bit of blood in my shoulders from a friendly movement, like a cable crossover or a fly. And I found that the extra volume started to grow my chest, and my bench actually started to feel a lot more secure off the bottom. Couple of rules of thumb. I don't recommend you go for broke on these. I don't recommend you absolutely annihilate the muscle. As you condition, you'll be able to push it a little bit harder without it affecting your performance. But in the beginning, you just need enough to get some blood in, to feel a little bit of a burn, to feel pumped. That's enough. And then carry that forward. And then eventually you can increase intensity and effort as you adapt to that. But I'm a big fan of pre-fatigue. And that also lends itself to the variety. Because with things like pre-fatigue techniques, you're kind of messing with the exercise order. So you might be driving to the gym and you might think, you know what, last week I started when I was fresh. Today I'm gonna swap the exercise order. I'm gonna do dumbbells first, then I'm gonna go bench press. Or I'm gonna do a little bit of machine work, and then I'm going to hit my compound stuff. And that adds just a nice fresh flavor. Again, very beneficial for hypertrophy. You're not gonna lose anything there. It just doesn't have that directionality that very strength-specific programs have. And lastly, advanced fatigue techniques. This is a real easy way to get the most out of instinctive training when you're not tethered to a very specific rate of progression. These allow you to put intensity and effort at the absolute highest priority, and you're just worried about exhaustion. That's all you care about. Now, usually you can apply these things to your isolation work no matter what program you're on. If you're running a strength-specific program and the last couple exercises is tricep work or delt raises or hamstrings, you can take those into the weeds and that's not a problem. It becomes a problem when you're trying to apply them to compound movements, and because we don't have to worry about our CNS, we don't have to worry about our fatigue for the bench workout we're going to do in 2 or 3 days, we can just go ham. So you can actually apply these on squat variations, you can do it on some deadlift variations or some hip hinge variations. Pressing, you can do it for all of your accessory work. It doesn't have to be every single one, but throw these in as it makes sense for you. And you don't have to commit to one either and do it for a long period of time. If you're feeling squirrely and you think, you know what, I want something just to really test myself today, you can do the odd round of forced reps. You can do the odd round of density training. You don't have to commit to doing it all at once and chunking it together. But density work, where you're just keeping the rest periods small, you can apply that again to your compound movements. You're going to fatigue much faster, but that's the point. Drop sets are absolutely great, especially if you have a partner. A little bit easier on some of the bigger compound movements if you have a partner. You need people to pull those plates off. But that's a very productive tool that not a lot of people use because, again, it's not considered very strength specific. Supersets, forced reps, partials are a good one. I'm a big fan of like double pumping reps. I think I got that from Ben Pakulski, but it's where, you know, you come up at a bicep curl, you release an inch, and then you squeeze again, and then you release under control. That extra little pump, it adds something. It just adds something to the lift. It just makes it so much harder. So usually I'll use that on cable and machine stuff for smaller isolation movements, but you can actually do that on things like bench pressing or shoulder pressing. You can actually do that on certain compound leg movements, things that you wouldn't be inclined to do, again, if you were in a strength-specific workout. Things like 21s are great. I'm a big fan of doing 21s for things like curls and hamstring curls, but you can also do them for things like RDLs. You can also, if you're just feeling sick, you can do them on bell squats or even barbell squats. So again, big benefit to this type of training, ton of variability, ton of options. Go out and experiment. Take a couple months, have fun, clear out from the heavy weight, learn to let the workout drive the progress, and that will be a very, very beneficial tool in your back pocket for when you are ready to commit to a program and you can just jump into strength-specific work. And then that extra structure will help just make that peak razor sharp. That's all I got for today, guys. Thanks so much for watching. Go ahead and leave your questions and comments in the comment box, or better yet, take it to Patreon. Patreon is where I upload my workouts daily with commentary, so you get to see how I put all of this into practice in real time. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Till next time, this is Bromley. I'll see you.